Like a backstage pass to the world of fly fishing travel, this is Waypoints, the podcast of destination angling. News and events, helpful travel tips, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from some of the most seasoned and experienced names in fishing travel. Waypoints is brought to you by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing Adventures, the industry's #1 specialty travel company for the very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered for your next fishing adventure. And now, your Waypoints host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
Bryant Dunn is the international director and co-owner of Himalayan Fly Fishing Adventures, a fishing and outfitting operation that has been exploring Bhutan for close to 20 years. Dunn's Bhutan operations include multi-day river excursions for golden and chocolate mahseer, shorter packages for brown trout and snow trout, a new lodge project that is slated to open in 2025, and Bhutan's first and only fly shop in the capital city of Thimphu. In addition to the Bhutan operations, Bryant also owns Dunn Outfitting International, with offerings in the Himalayas, Christmas Island, and North America. Bryant has been guiding and outfitting anglers for over 30 years in some of the world's most remote and distant fisheries, and over that time he's notched several first fishing descents throughout the Himalayan range. Bryant serves as Flyfishing International's ambassador to Bhutan and holds the title of Master Trainer of Fishing Guides for the Royal Government of Bhutan. Quite a title. I recently did a 2-week trip to visit and fish Bhutan with Bryant Dunn, Jeff Currier, legendary Indian mahseer angler Bobby Satpal, and cinematographer Chris Patterson. While there, I recorded a 2-part podcast, Part 1 talking with Bryant Dunn, and Part 2 with well-known international angler Jeff Currier. In this first episode, Bryant and I discuss how he first found his way to Bhutan, what makes the kingdom so unique and special, the species found throughout Bhutan, tips and techniques for targeting mahseer on the fly, and why adventurous anglers should consider this destination for future excursions. Well, I am live in Bhutan, the amazing Kingdom of Bhutan. I am here with Bryant Dunn, the owner and founder of Himalayan Fly Fishing Adventures. Bryant, thanks so much for joining us today on Waypoints.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Super stoked to be here.
Well, this is one I've been looking forward to for a while. So much to talk about. But before we do that, I want you to describe for our listeners our current setting. We are out here in the middle of nowhere. Tell us a little bit about where we're sitting right now as we record this episode.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's pretty jaw-dropping where we're sitting, this setting. So we're in the eastern Himalayas. We're in the Kingdom of Bhutan, specifically in the very southern reaches of the Western Kingdom. We're sitting on a 100-foot bluff above one of the finest mahseer rivers in the Himalayan range, and we're surrounded by jungle in every direction. The Himalayan foothills here, as we've gotten closer to India on this expedition, heavily covered in jungle, many, many dozens of different tree species. And in the background, listeners may be able to hear bird species chirping away. You may hear peacocks over the course of this interview. You may hear hornbills. You could hear dozens of different species, even barking deer. I think there was a leopard across the river a little while ago based on what the deer were doing. So we are in one of the most beautiful settings you could imagine, especially when you're talking about fly fishing.
Well, and we're high on this jungle bluff. We're overlooking the river that we've been floating. We're going to talk more about that. But as we get started, I want to hear from you, why Bhutan as a destination? Now, most listeners have never even thought about fishing over here. So give us the why, kind of a quick breakdown on what makes this country so unique for anglers.
There's so much that Bhutan offers, whether it's the cultural aspects, which are truly unique, not just unique as another Himalayan culture, but literally within Bhutan itself. It is unlike any other Himalayan country or any other country in the world for that matter. So the cultural aspects are spectacular, the various temples and zongs and monasteries and all of those cultural attractions. And of course, the Bhutanese people are as nice as they come. They're exceptional people, as you well know. So there's that. But the why behind Bhutan, I think for many anglers, Bhutan is a new frontier. It's a place that almost no one has ever been to fly fish. But for those of us who have been here and have explored this kingdom, it's absolutely exceptional. You know, the rivers are as beautiful as they come. The target species are spectacular. It goes on and on and on. The why behind Bhutan will be unique to each angler, but in every case, it will be, I believe, life-changing.
Well, and it's a trip that I think people haven't even known was a possibility for a long time. It's kind of, you've been doing it a long time, and I want to ask you about that, but it's kind of new on the radar for a lot of people, and I guarantee you a lot of people listening to this episode are thinking, Bhutan, I didn't even know you could fly fish in that part of the world. So it is incredible. But before we talk about how you personally arrived here and how you started your guide and outfitting business here in Bhutan, I want to hear a little bit about your background, Bryant. Tell us kind of your story. How did you find your way to this sport, to fly fishing, to the industry? Let's hear a little bit about you.
Well, it began, the very beginning was like so many of us that are passionate anglers, came from a family of fly fishermen and never really knew anything different. So growing up in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and then moving after school to the Northern Rocky Mountains in Idaho and all the wonderful trout streams and rivers and lakes there in the Northern Rockies. And then I started experimenting in my earliest 20s, started traveling around North America, deep into Canada and the North, and started poking around different foreign countries with a fly rod and just generally pursuing that adventure angling that drew me in, as it does draw in so many of Yellow Dog's guests and those of us who share that common stripe for adventure and exploration. And so off we went, and I was guiding in outfitting in many different countries in the Central Pacific, the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, really just about everywhere you could think of. And then the phone rang one day. And it was someone I knew who was a partner in a Bhutanese American company. And they were trying to figure out if there might be a chance that recreational angling could be introduced and developed in the Kingdom of Bhutan. So I received a job offer that was essentially assess the fishability of the Kingdom of Bhutan, and let's find out if it's something that could be developed. Was the best job offer I've ever had. Was the best job I've ever had. Spent a month over here exploring, carte blanche, permitted on every river in the kingdom, and it was exceptional. I found some fisheries that were truly world-class that didn't necessarily reveal themselves until the 8th or 10th or 12th exploration of them as we began to refine our techniques and understand the target species better, and then exploring many fisheries that simply didn't have what it took, to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, you got to find the places that were viable, and you had to pay your dues. How many years ago was your first trip over to Bhutan?
I was hired to come over in 2007 for the first time, so it's been a little while now.
Yeah, it's going on 18, 19 years almost. Pretty amazing. So you got here, you fished these rivers, you saw the magic of the kingdom, you saw the potential of these fisheries. And was it at that point you said, okay, I'm all in. I think there's a business opportunity here and I want to be a part of this?
I think there were those feelings, but I think it was deeper than that. The first time I came here in the fall of 2007, I was exploring a high alpine valley with a beautiful stream in it that had a bunch of brown trout, really, really good fishing, small water fishing. And it was an exceptional day. It was the day of the descending Buddha, so that's a major holiday in the fall here in Bhutan. That happened to coincide that day with the return of the black-necked cranes on their migration back from Tibet, something that is considered a very holy and important and auspicious occurrence here in Bhutan in the fall when they arrive after having been gone throughout the monsoon. It also happened to be my birthday that day. It all came together in one moment where I felt bonded with this place in this time in a way that I'd never bonded with another place in my life. And there was a magic to that moment, and I was all in right then. And that was after having landed my first brown trout in the kingdom on that very same day. So it was personal. It was, I guess, a bit spiritual, frankly. And that I was all in then, and that led to the motivation and inspiration that has followed up for the last couple decades.
Well, there has been a little bit of history of fly fishing, specifically in Bhutan. Not much, but I think the first time I heard about anybody coming over here and fishing was John Bailey, who was the owner at the time of Dan Bailey's Fly Shop in Livingston, Montana. I remember a catalog cover with from Bailey's where he was riding on an elephant holding a couple fly rods. And I thought, well, where is that place? And it mentioned Bhutan. And he was the first person I had heard about coming over here and fly fishing. I don't know if you've are more familiar with different history or other pioneers over here, but it doesn't seem like there have been many.
No, there have not been many. In fact, there haven't been any, except for John, to my knowledge. It's not that a handful of people didn't cast a fly for a trout along the way in their one and only visit to the kingdom. But as far as repetitious returning to this kingdom with the purpose, among other things, of fly fishing, John, to my knowledge, was really the first one here. Now, the British started coming in the 1770s, actually, and would have been throwing fly spoons on horsehair and silk leader in those times, but certainly none of them. It wasn't Bhutan until 1907 when it became an actual independent country. So I would give the kudos to John for coming over here early, and he came over somewhere around 24 times in those early years in the 80s, and even perhaps a year or two earlier than that. So really really good stuff for John, and groundbreaking stuff. And actually, fishing has been allowed since 1974. Trout fishing only for brown trout, which were introduced out of Kashmir in the 1930s, and snow trout, which are an indigenous species, not really a trout, actually. Schizothorax richardsonii is the Latin name for them. Snow trout are actually part of the suckerfish. They have a subterminal mouth, but they look troutier than your North American suckers. They're a wonderful species to pursue with a fly rod. But they're not mahseer, and I know we're going to talk about that in a bit.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because you've mentioned brown trout, which were introduced, the snow trout, as they call them, which is a very unique regional species. But the big draw, and I think it's going to be a massive draw in the years to come as more people find out about this, is the mahseer fishing. This is a fish that is considered a sacred fish here in the region and certainly in Bhutan. And it's very unique to this part of the world. Tell us a little bit about the mahseer species that you find here in the kingdom.
Oh, well, if you haven't fished for mahseer yet, I highly encourage you to consider it. Mahseer are a spectacular, and let's be very clear here, when people refer to mahseer, and there are about 16 or 17 unique taxonomical species of mahseer throughout the world, and that really would be the Himalayan range and Southeast Asia primarily, even down to Malaysia, even Borneo, red mahseer, blue mahseer, Thai mahseer, golden mahseer, chocolate mahseer. It goes on and on. But when it comes to Bhutan and the Himalayan range specifically, this is the range of the golden mahseer, Tor putatora. It is the alpha predator of Himalayan rivers. It is an ambush predator. It is, when you think of GTs in the flats, for instance, marauders, thugs, murderers.
Gangsters.
They are indeed. So are mahseer, especially the golden mahseer. And these are fish that can grow anywhere. The current IGFA world record with a fly is 56 pounds. And fish have been recorded through history with traditional gear of well over 100 pounds, 120, 130 pounds. So these fish have the capabilities of growing to be massive. Additionally, there is also the chocolate mahseer, and the chocolate mahseer is occupies the same rivers. It lives in different habitat within those rivers, however, and we'll talk about that a little more as we talk about specific places to look for those species and techniques to use for them. But the Neolis achilles hexagonalepis is the chocolate mahseer, and it's another spectacular Himalayan species. It's wonderful to fish for.
And that's one of the things that you guys are offering through your programs, are access to both the golden mahseer and the chocolate mahseer, two species that I think are very new to kind of the sport fishing and destination angling market. But I think they're species that people are going to be hearing a lot more about in the years to come because they're a sensational quarry on a fly rod. I've thought oftentimes that, anybody that loves chasing steelhead, anybody that loves chasing Atlantic salmon, you're going to love mahseer fishing because there's so many similarities.
There are, absolutely are. Absolutely. And even the habitat, if you were to eliminate the jungles that would be behind you as you're standing on the bank fishing, or, a large part of what we offer is float trips, multi-day, multi-night wilderness float trips, NRS rafts, fishing frames, casting platforms, lean bars, absolutely a Western-style experience in the heart of the Himalayas. If you were to eliminate all that surrounds you, you might feel like you're standing on a river in British Columbia, and you might be casting and swinging and stepping and casting and swinging and stepping all day long, especially as you pursue the goldens, because that's the type of habitat they tend to occupy.
Yeah, the water types that you're fishing for goldens is so similar to like a tasty classic steelhead run. So similar.
It is, and we talk about steelhead being the fish of 1,000 casts, and there are many of us anglers, especially some that are more experienced, that don't need to hook a fish every time they cast a fly. Right? It's about paying your dues, analyzing the environment, using techniques, working hard, and eventually connecting with that fish with a fly in the lip. And that's what's satisfying, is the hard work you put into it, and that's what makes that. The tug is the drug for sure, but man, it's a lot more powerful when you don't get that many of them, or when you don't need to have that many of them. Mahseer fishing is a lot like steelhead fishing.
That's well said. Tell me, because the mahseer are in the carp family, I think for a lot of North American anglers, it immediately conjures up the thought of, well, why would I fly halfway around the world to chase a carp? What is it about these mahseer, both the goldens and the chocolates that are found here in Bhutan, that make them such a spectacular fish? Describe the fish for us, if you would.
Well, first of all, if you look down on carp species, on cyprinids, because for whatever reason your judgment leads you to feel that way, I highly consider that you reconsider that opinion, because the fact of the matter is, and ask any dedicated carp fisherman, carp are spectacular on a fly rod. They're unbelievable. They pull as hard. Just because a fish doesn't jump doesn't mean it's not a fish you would enjoy pursuing. So fact of the matter is, golden mahseer and chocolate mahseer are two of the most beautiful fish that I've ever seen. Let's talk about the golden mahseer first. These fish can grow to be over 3 feet, even 4 feet long. They're a scaled fish. The scales would include, generally speaking, you're dealing with a white underbelly. The lateral line area, the midriff of the fish would be a darker gray with blue hues. And the scales throughout the mid part of through the lateral line of the fish and to its back include gold, golden, white, and on the larger specimens from about the back of the dorsal fin forward, even a little farther behind, forward, the front part of the scales are a celadon green, a sagebrush color, and all of this is iridescent. So then as you move forward towards the gill plate, you're talking about really what looks like almost a mercury or a white silver colored gill plate that has these remarkable reflections of light. It's kind of like a golden Dorado's gill plate. It looks three-dimensional when you look at it and the light plays off of it. The fish have barbels. They're built for speed. Big dorsal fins.
Huge, powerful tail.
Incredible, powerful tail, which, depending on the individual mahseer you land, may have a tequila sunrise orange hue to the bottom of the tail, generally speaking, and also the anal fin. Sometimes that can continue up to the top of the tail as well. So you have this play of colors that's really mesmerizing and spectacular. Now, that's the golden mahseer. Let's talk about the chocolate mahseer. Okay, that varies a lot. And by the way, about 1 out of every 10 golden mahseer is melanistic.
Yeah.
So you are sometimes catching mahseer that are anywhere from dark to almost jet black. It's just a genetic, it's just an anomaly. But you never know what you're going to get when that line comes tight. So then we talk about the chocolate mahseer. Chocolates tend to be a whitish belly. The fins and the tail tend to be bluish, a bluish hue, a blue-gray. And the tails most often have a black ray on the top and bottom of the tail. No orange within that tail, but a gorgeous blue hued tail. Very strong and large tail. The scales tend to be copper, white copper, and again, that celadon, that green hue pops
like a
out.
Turquoise,
It's
kind
amazing.
of green, teal color. It's spectacular.
It's really beautiful. So different color schemes on both of those fish. The chocolates have more of a snub nose, where the goldens have an elongated snout. Barbels on both. They're built for speed. And think about this. So these fish live in rivers that during the spring, the lowest flows of the year, might only be running at 2,000, 2,500 CFS. But in the middle of July, when the monsoon is at its peak, these rivers could be 40, 50,000 CFS. So how does a fish survive in a turbulent water like that? And the answer is they have to be the strongest freshwater fish in the world.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Amazing.
Because this is not a gentle environment over here. As you said, it can go from low flowing, almost crystal clear rivers at certain times of the year to raging torrents coming down out of the Himalayas, where only the toughest creatures are going to survive. These fish are literally tough as hell just to live and survive here. And then that translates into when you actually come tight on one of these fish and hook them, get ready, because this is not a gentle mayfly sipping creature.
Two things about that. One is you better be ready when that fish eats. Okay, you need to be prepared with the proper gear. You must have everything you need, which will be maxed out before the end of your fight if you're lucky enough to retrieve that fish. And I'm talking about 8 to 10 weights. The most common rod probably for golden mahseer fishing would be a 9. I prefer a 10 because if you hook into one of the big ones and they take you into heavy water, big rapids I'm talking about, you're going to need everything you got. And it might not be enough. But we'll go into tackle selections, terminal tackle here in a minute, I think.
Well, let's talk about it now.
Okay,
I'm
let's
glad
do it.
you brought it up.
Right
because
on.
I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, if I do want to go over and tackle mahseer fishing in the Himalayas, if I want to go to Bhutan, what do I need?
Yeah,
right?
What do you need? Well, you need to be well prepared, and that includes the rod weights I'm talking about. I would recommend bringing you definitely want multiple rods. This is a rough environment. Jim just said it accurately, that rods get broken over here. Rod tips get snapped. Going through rapids can be rough on gear. We only broke one rod this float so far, but snapped that 10 weight in its butt section, and it was kind of a gnarly deal, and it was
and the
exciting.
trip's not over.
No, the trip's not over yet. That's for sure.
We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, so let's take it from the rod tip down. So really, I'd be thinking about heavy duty reels that are suited for those rod weights, and I would be bringing a variety of line selections, including floating line. I would be bringing a moderate sink tip or an intermediate sink tip, is what I would recommend. There's a pretty nice clear line from SA that just came out recently.
Yeah, the new magnitude.
Worth looking at for sure.
Yep.
And then maybe something that sinks a little faster. You may want to dredge while you're here, and there's certainly water for that, whether it's where we camp in some large pools or just floating or getting out and walking and wading some of the deeper water from the banks. So a good combination of fly lines. And once you figure out what fly line you're going to use for the day or for the moment, then from that, let's talk about leaders.
Well, let me ask you a quick question on lines. Tropical fly lines.
Yeah, this is warm water. It's not super warm water, but it is warmer water. And I would think our water temperatures today on the river where we're standing would be in the high 60s, maybe as high as 70 degrees. I think that would be a pretty accurate estimation. So keep that in mind. You're not fishing the cold, clear waters of the Rocky Mountains or the steelhead waters of British Columbia. This is a different deal. We're surrounded by a jungle, not a forest, I would say. And average temperatures on our float trips would be anywhere from the high 70s to the low 90s with some humidity along the way. So that'll give you an idea of the backdrop. And when it comes down to the leaders and tippet, a few different options. Tapered leaders are certainly one solid option, and you might be considering fluorocarbon over monofilament. If you did that, you would be thinking somewhere in the never less than 25-pound range. But what I find with more of my, some of my more experienced mahseer fishing buddies is we're just doing straight 30, 35-pound fluoros straight off our fly line loop to loop, and that works really nicely. Again, rough country around here, a lot of big boulders. You're fraying line. You're throwing some bigger bugs, and I want to talk about the habits of mahseer and what they eat, and so you can consider that when you're putting together your fly list. But I know this right now. If you go to Yellow Dog and check out their fly shop and what they offer and supply there, they're right on the money. You really don't need to go anywhere else. And just letting you know, because there's no messing around with this stuff. If you don't get the right gear and have it ready for these trips, you have the chance of missing or losing the fish of a lifetime. And to come all the way over here and make that mistake is probably not what you want to be doing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about fly patterns. Describe kind of what these fish eat. You said a moment ago they're highly predatory fish. They're oftentimes ambush predators. What is it they're looking for, and what are they reacting to, both the Goldens and the chocolates?
Yeah, and in both cases, it's the same here, which is, remember this comment, this is really important. Mahseer are omnivores. And on the list of food sources, it includes certainly other fish and bait fish. A ubiquitous bait fish throughout the Himalayan range is the chilva. So that's, it's about a 3 to 4 inch, 5 inch bait fish, has 7 vertical stripes, black stripes on it, tends to be silverish, beige-ish.
Almost like par marks down the side of it.
They look like that. Yeah. And so bait fish, and any bait fish, anything will happen. They will eat anything like that. So including juvenile golden and chocolate mahseer. But they will also eat leeches. They will also eat detritus and scrape algae. They'll also eat insects off the surface. There are big cicadas over here and all kinds of, and grasshoppers. So you might be fishing with grasshopper patterns. There are stoneflies over here, stonefly patterns, cicadas. Chernobyl ants are a real popular dry fly for mahseer. And then mahseer also eat fruit. And I've seen them eat leaves many times. Anything, leaves with seed pods, anywhere there's protein, or just leaves that fall off. The trees and fruit like figs. And they will definitely eat some of the red, over-ripened figs that fall out of the trees. They don't seem to eat the green ones, but they eat the red ones. Something to keep in mind as you select your fly patterns or tie at home and try to be creative. And other fruits would be jackfruit or even oranges. So the color orange seems to be something that catches their eye. So what does that mean? That means that you could be selecting streamers and baitfish patterns. That means you could be selecting various dry fly patterns and subsurface patterns such as stonefly nymphs, big rubber legs that might sink. You can fish under a strike indicator over here. You can fish dry flies over here. But most of what you will be doing is casting and stripping and or swinging some sort of fish pattern, bait fish pattern, like a sculpin, for instance, or a chilva. Crease flies work well here. Why? Because mahseer are amazingly sensitive to vibrations in the water. And when you have a crease fly that disturbs the water surface or just below the water surface, those mahseer feel that. They might not be able to see it initially, but they feel it. So you've got a wide variety to choose from, and it's fun to be creative, especially if you're an active fly tyer, to think about what just might be out there that no one's tried before.
Well, it pays to prepare, have a good selection of flies. I think it's also important to note whether you're buying or tying, you need to have a very strong hook, because I've straightened several hooks this week, some on fish, some on, trying to pull it off vines and rocks and, things I've inadvertently cast into as we're floating down. But strong hooks are key.
If you don't have a strong hook, it's probably, better to do a cultural tour with us than a fishing specific tour, because again, mahseer are next level. What you think you know about steelhead, what you think you know about some of these tougher species, well, apply the lessons you've learned for the most challenging and strongest species that you fish for and apply them to mahseer, then take it up another notch.
Well, let's talk about how you guys in your fisheries on your rivers are typically fishing for mahseer. There's a combination of getting out and wading and swinging. We talked about some similarities to steelhead or salmon fishing. But you're also doing something really unique in this part of the world. You mentioned it a moment ago. You're doing a lot of fishing from the boats as you're drifting. Again, kind of Western style fishing that you might even find on the Madison or the Missouri. So talk to us a little bit about your techniques and the styles of fishing.
Absolutely. And these are techniques that have evolved and been refined over the last 20 years. It is well known throughout the mahseer world that mahseer are drawn to tributary mouths. And there are many reasons why they are. A change in temperature in the water that flows into the river, food sources entering the river from tributary mouths, as well as tributaries being spawning areas. So what we've learned through a lot of scientific study, and we'll touch on that in just a minute, is that Mahseer spawn during the monsoon, which in this part of the world is June through August. And when the rivers rise and those tributaries swell, that's when the mahseer will flood up them to go spawn. In advance of that, they wait at the mouths. So that initially was our technique to hike to or float to tributary mouths, confluences, and focus our time and energies there. And it works well. However, as some of the spookier fish in the world, once you blow those fish out of there, they might not come back for an hour or two or a day or two. And so then you're limited in productivity and what you can accomplish. So naturally, we started working harder to find fish in different places. And what we came to learn is that the float and fish technique is really the way to go. Now, where we started by landing almost 100% of our fish at trib mouths, now we're at about 90 to 95% of our fish are landed during our floats and not at tributary mouths. And that's just a fundamental change and improvement. And so, as you mentioned, Jim, we use primarily NRS rafts. 16-footers suit the water levels here well. We equip those with full-blown NRS fishing frames, and those include the casting platforms and lean bars that I mentioned earlier in the day. So you're very sturdy standing and casting. It's very safe. We do require PFD use while we're floating because, even a class 1.5, if you happen to lose your footing and fall out, we want to make sure you're safe. Safety always first. And then we'll float down the river on our standard 10-day mahseer packages, 10 and 11-day packages we offer. That would include a 6-day, 5-night wilderness float trip, or in our upcoming lodge, which again we'll touch on in a minute, that might range out to 7 days of fishing, but it's mostly done from our rafts. Pull them over, walk and wait a section, get back in, keep on floating and casting. So a lot of casting goes on during the day. You'll be exhausted at the end of every day, and you will have had your fill for sure and enjoyed every minute of it in a Western style that most anglers would be used to.
And that's one of the things that both surprised me about this trip, Bryant, and I've also absolutely loved it because the mahseer fishing I've done in other countries in past years have involved, as you said, really focusing on confluences and tributaries, all walk wading, lots of swinging. And then if we were traveling down rivers, it was kind of a taxi ride to the next, what they considered hot spot. You guys have it dialed in where you are fishing the entire way down and you're catching fish, especially these chocolates. Yeah. And I think that is, there's pretty constant engagement. It's fishing. You can have red hot days. We've seen that this week. You can have some tough times throughout each day. We've also seen that. The productivity will vary, but you always feel like you're in the game. You always feel like you are fishing, areas and sections of water that are going to be productive, and oftentimes they are.
Absolutely. And I think that's certainly what sets us apart in this kingdom is our infrastructure. Of course, it's more about our people and our team. That's always the most important aspect, but we are equipped, and it's taken a lot of work to get everything over here. It's taken a lot of time to build the infrastructure, in addition to all the exploration and years of that. So we're the only ones in the Himalayan range that offer this style of option, and it is without question the most productive approach.
And you guys have a lot going on over here. I mean, we've talked about these 10 and 11-day float trips, these mahseer expeditions, but you've got multiple irons in the fire when it comes to your overall business here. You also offer day trips out of a number of the kind of well-visited areas in the kingdom where, let's say, people are coming over for a cultural trip or a sightseeing trip. They're spending a week, 2-3 weeks in the kingdom. They can add on a couple days of fishing, especially trout fishing, in various locations.
Absolutely. And there's some very good trout fishing over here. One of my initial goals is, and John Bailey told me this one time when we sat down, and I appreciated his thoughts, that at that time, people would come to Bhutan and to go fishing. My hope was that I could demonstrate that people could come to Bhutan to go fishing. And I believe we've accomplished this now after a couple decades of working. But yes, it's absolutely true that we do offer daily brown trout and snow trout trips in many of the major population centers, including, should you come and visit, Paro, Thimphu, Punakha, Bumtang, and other places. For a traveler to Bhutan, those places will be familiar to you, and if you haven't been here yet but are booked to come, just know that at any time you can give us a call. You can reach out to Himalayan Fly Fishing Adventures and at our website address of HimalayanFlyFishing.com, and we can accommodate that for you anytime. A little advance notice always helps.
But those are simple day trips.
They
You can
are.
add that on to any other trip
Any
you're
trip.
doing over here,
Any
which is
trip.
great.
It's really easy.
You've also, and you mentioned this a moment ago, but you guys have a big project that's going to launch in the spring of 2025. You are opening Bhutan's first fishing-focused lodge. Tell us a little bit about that.
Really excited about that. Very excited about that. So we have a lodge property that we are currently developing. Much of the infrastructure is already in place, and the actual structures we break ground on September 1st of 2024. We will be ready and finished and complete and up and running for the spring mahseer season, which, by the way, runs from approximately March 1st through about May 15th each year. We run multiple rivers. We can run multiple groups per week. Our capacity is such that we can handle that. But yeah, the lodge is going to be amazing, and we're having fun coming up with its final name, and you and I have been talking about that a little bit too. But it will cater to groups of up to 6 anglers simultaneously on the border of one of the most remarkable national parks in the Kingdom of Bhutan or anywhere in the Himalayas. Riverside property, of course, so you'll be sitting there during cocktail hour with a beautiful view of a major southern Himalayan river as the hornbills fly over your head, and the white-bellied heron, the rarest bird in the world, does the same. And, of course, the attention to detail and the level of guest service will be unmatched within the industry, and so we're excited about that. And that does complement our other offerings, including our wilderness floats that we've been offering now for a couple of years, and also our fly shop, which just
Congratulations on that, by the way. The
Thank you.
first fly shop, and I mean legitimate fly shop anywhere in this part of the world.
Yeah, we're really happy, and what it really is just it's an expression. It's really a microcosm of the results of a huge amount of effort by a lot of different people, whether that be those of us on the recreational angling commercial side of things, whether it be on the Bhutanese government side of things, and they're very, very diligent and hard work. Taking care of their natural resources, working diligently in the conservation world, and pursuing this dream of recreational angling within the kingdom. And, of course, all of our friends and family throughout the kingdom and around the world. It's an honor to have opened up Himalayan Fly Fishing Adventures, home base there in Thimphu, and we'd love you to come join us next time you're in Bhutan.
Yeah, the fly shop right in the heart of the capital city, and you walk in and you realize that this is a serious operation dedicated to doing it right, and to not just booking trips or sending people out into excursions, but to really building a culture of fly fishing here in the kingdom, which is remarkable.
Can you imagine coming to a country that has never had a meaningful fly fishing program or recreational angling? And just to make it very clear, the legislation that allowed recreational mahseer angling was only passed in 2022, and the first trip, which I was honored and blessed to run last year in 23, was the first. So we're just a year or so into this whole thing, and it's been truly exceptional. But there's a long way to go. We're just getting started. But it's unique and truly is a new frontier of fly fishing.
And you guys were really instrumental in helping the kingdom and the powers that be establish that recreational fishing infrastructure. You guys were heavily involved in making recommendations to not just make it legal to operate, but to set it up the right way so that, moving forward, the resources would be protected, everything would be permitted, it would be legal, and done right.
Well, what we did is and what was needed to be done was you've got to base these decisions in science. You've got to base them on science. You've got to base them in conservation, and specifically fisheries conservation. So in 2014, the Fisheries Conservation Foundation, and I'm very fortunate to be a board member of that entity, along with many other hardworking conservationists, we were approved to run a radio telemetry study that was led by Dr. Dave Phillip and Julie Clausen of FCF and the University of Illinois. And so we were able to set up many different radio telemetry receivers up and down 3 major rivers within the kingdom. And then we went to a tagging program, and we tagged over 100 golden and chocolate mahseer of mature age that then we were able to monitor up and down the river systems. Up until that time, we were working completely on legend and stories and grandfather's memories of
local
the olden days.
intel.
That's all there was. There was no science. So once we had that ran from approved in 14, initiated in 15, completed in 19, a 5-year study. We had so much data that we came to understand so much about chocolate and golden mahseer that we now knew their behavior. Well, first of all, we realized they migrated. We learned that for sure. Migratory species. Okay, that's important. Where do they go? Well, they migrate up to about 1,000 meters above sea level. So 3,000 vertical feet is about as high as you'll ever find a golden or chocolate mahseer. Okay, well, that's great because that eliminates about 60% of the north-south region of the kingdom. So now we've suddenly narrowed it down to where they are. We learned that their recruitment, their return to tributary mouths and spawning areas was every year they went to the same places. We even had fish that would go up a wrong river system, just like steelhead and salmon do sometimes, turn around and come back down and then go back up and get to the tributary mouth where they'd spawned the year before and all of the years before that. So now we had data. Now we understood the fish. Not able to do population studies, just not possible in these larger rivers. Electrofishing doesn't work because the rivers are too big for effective electrofishing. So we were angling for them. And Dave and Julie did a great job of putting the teams together necessary to complete that study. So all of a sudden we had science on our side. We understood that recreational angling was going to become possible. We were getting closer. We still had a few people to convince, and we still had to write regulations. We still had to create policy, and that's a fun story on its own as well.
But you guys have paid your dues over here. This did not just happen overnight.
No, that's a fact. That's a fact because can you imagine, and this is, I won't say this is a sensitive topic, but it's one worth mentioning, that is we are practicing recreational angling in a country that is over 90% Buddhist.
I think that's really important to mention because the conventional thinking with that background and with this culture is that sport fishing is probably not going to be well received by the local populace. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it is really worth discussing, and it's very important for us to explain our perspective and philosophy on this so that other people will understand and begin to see it this way, which is considering the greater good. We had the benefit. I mean, when's the last time a country opened for the first time in history to recreational angling, right? We got a chance to look around the world and see the policies and procedures that worked best in the international angling market, as well as the ones that don't work well. And we could cherry pick all of them, whether it was catch and immediate release, which is a part of the law. A single barbless hook, we made the law. Best handling practices is law. Keep fish wet. And we also implemented the requirement that all guides be Bhutanese citizens. So you're talking about perhaps the most well thought out and wise approach to recreational angling regulations in the world. Once again, when it comes to environmental science and environmental stewardship, Bhutan shows itself to be a leader, a global leader in the world in that regard, and that certainly applies to recreational angling. So
you guys had a blank slate to work with. That's pretty exciting and unusual.
It was awesome. So what would you do if some government came to you and said, design our recreational angling program?
From the ground up.
From the ground up. And that's the opportunity we had. And we did it in conjunction with the Bhutanese government and advisors within that government, FCF, et cetera. It was an exceptional experience.
And the regulations over here strike me as having been very well thought out, as you just mentioned, a lot of science behind the decision making. But they're serious about their regulations. I mean, as we have been on this float over the course of this past week, we've talked with rangers that are out on these rivers. They're serious about protecting these resources. This is also not a DIY type location. You're not just going to come over here on vacation, bring a couple rods with you, and set out on your own and fish. I mean, there's a lot of regulation that goes into just being able to access these waters, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, and for those of you out there who are all about the DIY, and especially, some of you younger anglers out there who are beginning to push limits, explore places that perhaps have been explored very little, or expanding your own personal horizons within the fishing world, I applaud you. I am that person. I was that person. Most of my good friends are that person also. So good for you. Keep it up. There's a lot of good work to do out there. However, when it comes to Bhutan, for one thing, it's illegal. If you come here and go fishing on your own, everything you own will be confiscated and you'll be kicked out of the country. Just a heads up there.
And they're not
That's an
messing around.
your FYI on your DIY. You might want to just think twice about it. But that's okay. So you literally must have a Bhutanese guide here to go fishing, even just for a day of trout fishing. That is the law. And, of course, in addition to simply respecting the laws of Bhutan because it's the right thing to do, it's also something I would encourage you to consider because there is a price to pay. And the last thing you want to do is have to leave one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Because you were fishing on your own.
Oopsie.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, on these trips we've talked about, certainly these multi-day river float trips, these expeditionary mahseer trips, even with the new lodge, tell me about kind of who these trips are well suited to. Who is the ideal candidate, the ideal angler to come over and spend a week or 2 weeks fishing in Bhutan?
Well, it's good news that the tourism infrastructure in the kingdom is really superb. You know, even within our standard angling packages, which are all inclusive, by the way, they include once you land in Bhutan, they include your visas and the work that goes into obtaining your visas, your fishing permits, your route permits. You can't just drive around here. In fact, no one who's not a citizen can drive at all. We organize all of your ground transport for certain packages, your domestic air transport, all lodgings, all meals, you name it, we've done it for you. When you hit the ground, well before you hit the ground, you are good to go. So it's an all-inclusive package. And the tourism infrastructure is excellent. So that is why so many people who come here as non-angling visitors have such a wonderful time. It's really pretty cush living around here, even in the standard packages. As far as our angling packages go, I would say that just about anyone is well suited for this trip. However, do know it is a physically demanding form of fishing. This is expedition fishing. Okay, this is not five-star lodge fishing over here. If you're doing our wilderness float trips, it's going to be physically demanding. You're going to be in a rough environment. The weather could be wonderful, or it could be 95 humid. You could have hailstorms. You can have all kinds of things that take place. You are on whitewater for a week. Okay, so even a class 2 or 3 can throw you around a little bit, and you know, we have a larger rapid on this stretch of this river that we float that can be a lot. We ask and require our guests to walk around it with guidance, of course, from our guides, and then we'll run our boats through it. But even those of us who've been rowing boats for a long, long time, we get beat up in those rapids sometimes. And speaking for myself, this week I did. Fortunately, didn't get too wet, and we made it through okay, but. You know, it's not without a touch of risk, and that's fine. We mitigate that everywhere we can. We are trained medical professionals as well, so we got your back if something gets a little haywire. Worst case scenario, we do have the availability of helicopters to evacuate. So if you get into those situations, you're also going to be well taken care of. But I would just say if you're not comfortable living in the wilderness for a week at a time, then this is probably not your trip. Our lodge offering is a little bit different. That's a little cushier trip. It's still wilderness. It's still expedition fishing, but you're sleeping in a bed, not in a tent on a white sand beach around a campfire. Think twice about this. Do your research. Give the guys and gals at Yellow Dog a call and ask the hard questions. This trip doesn't need to be for everyone, but if it turns out it's for you, it's a life changer. It's unique utterly within the angling world.
Yeah, we've been talking about that a lot this past week as we've been floating. We book, a lot of destinations all over the world, 40 different countries, about 250 different lodges and outfitting operations. This is utterly unique. There's nothing like it. And, these multi-day float trips, they are adventurous. I mean, you're camping. You are out here. You got to love that. I think you got to be able to walk and scramble over river stones. You got to be fine, as you mentioned, sleeping on the ground. But you're not hurting for anything with the team that you have out here, the service, the food, the beer, enjoyed by the campfire each evening. It's kind of all there, which is great. But it is expedition fishing. I love the way you put that.
Yeah. And so think about this for a second, and it's important. Group dynamics. What does that mean to you? Well, group dynamics is critically important in the success of any expedition. And for those of you who've been deep, you know what I mean. It only takes one person with the wrong attitude or who isn't comfortable in those circumstances to really negatively affect a group. So is this for you? Ask yourself that question. Do you have thick skin? Do you have a good sense of humor? You like to have fun? Can you roll with the punches? If that's you, come join us. Call Jim and the gang. Let's go. And if that's not necessarily your comfort zone, they've got a whole lot of other options for you. I promise you that are also wonderful. It's just Bhutan is Bhutan, and you need to be ready for that.
And it really, I get asked all the time, Bryant, what's the next frontier? What's the new exciting thing that's out there? What are you, as you just mentioned, what are you personally excited about, Jim, as far as, the next destination that's going to be added? For me right now, in the here and now, this is it. This is exceptional. And this whole trip over here has just blown me away. The culture, the sights, the history, the people, and certainly the fishing, the river environment, everything that we're seeing is completely unique to any other place I've been. And it's legitimate. I will mention that from the gear and equipment to the safety to the logistical planning, every element of your packages has been well thought out, clearly by somebody who's been doing this a long time, and it shows on every level. It is a real deal fly fishing focused adventure, with a team of people who are good at what they do. They're experienced and they're committed to delivering the very best. And again, in a setting and an environment that's unlike anything else.
Well, thank you, first of all, and I say that on behalf of my team. I am nothing and nowhere without my team that is made up almost exclusively of Bhutanese. They are exceptional, and I am blessed and proud to be a part of their team. So thank you for that compliment. It takes a lot of hard work by a lot of people, and in this case, the result has been nothing short of magic.
Well, I want to close out with just a couple more questions for you. And I want to circle back around to something you mentioned a moment ago about the tourism infrastructure. That's probably the biggest surprise for me this week as we've traveled to the different cities and villages, as we've done the multi-hour van rides to the put-in and kind of crisscrossed that western and southern part of the kingdom. I've been amazed at the roads, the infrastructure, the restaurants, the tourist-focused services. Clearly, this is a kingdom that has invested a lot in that. And I'm sure if you came here 20 years ago, Bhutan was not ready for that level of tourism. My takeaway from this trip is Bhutan is absolutely ready.
Bhutan is ready, and the reason why it's ready is because of the remarkable leadership from His Majesty, the Fifth King. He has, following his father, who also was exceptional, and his father and the two kings that came before that, whether it was uniting the country in 1907 or bringing the Bhutan into the modern world, and in 1974 opening its borders, and then moving forward to develop the concepts of gross national happiness and high-value, low-volume tourism per the fourth king of Bhutan. Now the fifth king of Bhutan leads us into the new age, and he has made it a priority that every single Bhutanese will see themselves and be seen as the best host or hostess possible, and it's authentic. It's genuine. They are not here just to make money. In fact, I think that's one of the least important aspects to the Bhutanese. They're here to follow suit and the leadership of their majesty, the king, and they do it in an amazing way. So is Bhutan ready? Oh, Bhutan is ready. Is the fishing side of Bhutan ready? Up until now, up until recently, the answer would be not quite yet. But as of today, as of now, right now, Bhutan is the new frontier in international angling, and Bhutan is ready for you to come and fish it.
Well, I loved what you said. Previously, the thought process was, I'm going to go to Bhutan, and I might fish while I'm there. Now you can go to Bhutan specifically to fish. Yeah. And that's a big difference between those two things.
Fundamentally.
Well, final question. Actually, no. One question before that. We haven't touched on this yet. Tell us about getting to Bhutan. What's involved in that? I think that's really important because a lot of people don't know where Bhutan is. They don't quite know how to get here. What's involved in making the trip into Paro?
Absolutely. It's very easy to get here. Again, Bhutan is in the eastern Himalayas, so it's surrounded by India to the south, and actually the southwest and east, and Tibet, China to the north. But there, and slightly farther to the west is Nepal. So getting to Bhutan is very, very easy. If you're coming from the western half of the USA, it's most common, or even the rest of the country, to come through Bangkok. There are daily flights out of Bangkok. It's really easy. Once you land in BKK, we usually overnight there for 2 or 3 nights to adjust to the 12-hour time difference, which is important, jet lag adjustment. And then it's a quick little 3 to 4 hour flight, depending on whether you need to have a stop somewhere on the way to Bhutan. But it's a quick morning flight, and you're here. Couldn't be easier. Those flights are all run through Druk Air, D-R-U-K. Airlines, Druk Air, and easy to book those online. Do know that there are visa requirements and other things that start coming into play once you book an airline ticket. So that's where, of course, we come in, and we do all the heavy lifting there for you. So you don't need to stress at all. It's really easy, and we help you with your flights. There are other ports that fly to Bhutan, including New Delhi. If you want to come from Europe or the east coast of the USA, oftentimes you might come through India. Singapore is another option, and there's a few other options as well in Bangladesh and that. But Bangkok, boy, it's easy as it gets, and land there and enjoy a soft landing for a couple days, and then here you are in the kingdom.
And these really, to do this trip well, from the time you leave home to the time you return, it's about a 2-week trip.
I call it 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks, and worth every single moment that you're in the kingdom. There's no doubt.
Absolutely.
Well, here is my final question, and we'll close out with this. What do you think, Bryant, the future looks like, both for your operations here in Bhutan and for fly fishing here in Bhutan? I'm curious what you see for the road ahead.
I think that the road ahead for fly fishing in the Kingdom of Bhutan is exceptionally bright. And I would say that the future of Himalayan Fly Fishing Adventures will parallel that, and we look forward to being profoundly involved in the continued development of this wonderful passion, this wonderful sport as time passes on. I think that the resource management in this kingdom is also exceptional and to be respected. There are issues on the table that might revolve around hydroelectric power and the development of projects here and there through the kingdom and the region. We work diligently to do our best to bring our opinion to the table, that natural resources should be protected at all costs, and that river blockage is not an optimal situation. And there are open ears here, as there have been ever since we began. So I'm incredibly optimistic. And even though a few projects might be on the table in some places, they don't affect our operations or the places that we would like to be operating. So again, that's just an aside, but I couldn't be more excited. I couldn't be more optimistic. And I would encourage anyone to whom this really, really excites you, come on over and see the Himalayas. Can you imagine casting flies here for fish that might be as big as 50 pounds? I guarantee you no one you know has a trophy photo on the mantle that looks like what we produce here.
Well, we've got amazing resources. You've got your website that you mentioned. There is a full page and tons of photos that are up live on the yellowdogflyfishing.com website. And we've got an amazing amazing field report that we have filmed and put together on this trip that is live on YouTube television through the Yellow Dog channels. So all these things that Bryant and I have been talking about over the course of this episode, you can actually go and look at photos, you can watch video, and you can see all of this from a totally different dimension. So I'd highly encourage you to do that. Bryant, thank you for talking with us. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your story. And most of all, thank you for having me here in Bhutan. This has been an absolutely amazing trip.
Well, it's been our honor and our pleasure, and we feel very fortunate to hang out with the Yellow Dog gang. And, I really admire and respect what you've accomplished in the industry, Jim. So thanks for the opportunity. It's been been really fun hanging out.
Well, we'll be back. Next trip is going to be when the lodge opens. I can't wait.
Can't wait either.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Waypoints, part 1 of a 2-part series on fly fishing in the Kingdom of Bhutan. This has been recorded live on the banks of an amazing river here in southern Bhutan. Part 2 will include international angler, well-known angler Jeff Currier, who is with us on this trip. We'll be sitting down with Jeff to talk about his thoughts and takeaways from this amazing mahseer adventure. Be sure to join us for our next episode, and remember that no matter where you fish and where you find yourself, no one ever regretted a life of adventure.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Waypoints is produced by Brian Gregson, with music provided by the Steep Canyon Rangers. Visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more destination profiles, travel news, and expert advice, and be sure to join us for our next episode.